Yes, I'm here.
Awesome. Thank you for not giving up. And thank everyone for sticking around. Um, so we're just going to go ahead and hop right in. So, that being said, hello everyone. Welcome back to another IG Live collab discussion with me, your host, Dominique. If you're watching for the first time, I would like to officially welcome you. And after this video is ended, please be sure to follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Dominique Smith Author. And those of you who are in now, please feel free to share this video link with your family members and your friends, any teachers, principals, guidance counselors, anyone on your contact list. Tell them to hop on in because tonight's message is really important. We want to make sure that it falls on the right minds, ears, and hearts so that we can see the progress that we want to see. Without further ado, tonight's topic is the importance of including BIPOC, Bahamian, and Caribbean books in schools in the Bahamas, but specifically I wanted to focus on the preschool section as well as the primary school section. So if you don't know, guess what BIPOC means. It means Black, Indigenous, People of Color, and that in a nutshell is Caribbean people. So Miss Meadows is my guest tonight, and she is an absolutely phenomenal lady. I am honored that she agreed to be my guest, and Miss Meadows is a well-respected, well-loved, well-known teacher here in Grand Bahama. She is also the vice principal of Sunland Baptist Academy, and she is also a fellow Bahamian author, so I'm excited to have her on. And I'm just going to let her take over and tell us anything else that we need to know, how long she's been a teacher and all that good stuff. Welcome, Ms. Meadows.
Well, thank you, Dominique, and good evening, everyone. As Dominique said, I'm an educator. I'm a veteran educator. I don't know why she wants me to put my years out there and date myself. However, I have been in education for about 23, 24 years now.
Wow.
Spent 19 years, and then I spent a year in private tutoring, and now I'm going into my fourth year as a vice principal of academic affairs at Sunland Baptist Academy. I am a Bahamian author, like she said. I've released 2 installments in my Little Ladena Island Girl series, so it's a children's book. Ladena and Ladena Color Bit about me, Dom.
Okay, awesome. And I'm glad that you said how many years you're teaching because it speaks to your overall knowledge in this field. And so you have the professional capacity to speak on the subject that we're talking about. And so don't feel like you've just dated yourself. Feel as if you qualified yourself. And so with that, I would like for us to jump into this discussion. You know, I always like to give a little bit of backstory before I go forward so people know why it is we're discussing what we are discussing. And you know, the pandemic has given me a lot of time to really think about different things, think about the direction that I wanted to take my social media, use my platform to promote certain things. And one of those things was promoting Caribbean voices and Black voices in children's literature stories. And the reason why that was so important to me is because I remember when I was growing up, I was an avid reader. I read just about everything that was in Sunland's classrooms in preschool and in primary school. I read everything that was in the children's section in the library. And I exhausted all of the books in the Sir Charles Haywood Library children's section. And I'm trying to vividly recall if there were any books that included Black or BIPOC characters, and there were very limited books. I think the only couple of books I could remember were Aladdin, mainly the character Jasmine from it, and then Pocahontas. And with those 2 characters, I would end up taking the sheet off of my bed and wrap it around my head and walk around the house and pretend like I had long flowing hair like those characters. And then my mom, she would be like, girl, take this sheet off of your head. You're dragging it on the floor. And I would just feel this sense of sadness, like when I took the sheet off of my head, because I didn't have the long flowing hair like Pocahontas and Jasmine. And so I felt as if the way that I looked, it was not right. I felt as if I was not beautiful, basically. And so I felt that it was extremely important to read books that have characters that look like how we look. And that is what brought me to writing books now, because of my niece. She was growing up, and I wanted her to have books that had characters that looked like her. So I wanted for us to go ahead. You know, you've had experience teaching at, I think, at least about 2 schools. I know Mary Star and Sunland. So I wanted to ask, in your professional opinion, you know, how receptive have schools been with celebrating these types of authors and introducing these types of books to their students?
Okay, before I go into that, though, Dom, let me just add a little backstory as well, I guess.
Go ahead.
Just if you had the experience of not having too many books of that nature in your day, you can imagine me, because I just told you how long I've been teaching, so that kind of dated myself. So then I would have come along a little earlier than you did. And like you, I was an avid reader from the age of 3, read everything I could get my hands on. And I enjoyed books, and I will say that I wouldn't trade that experience, because the wealth of knowledge, the experience, the way my horizons were broadened by reading books that had characters that were foreign to me, or places or realities that were foreign to me, it broadened my horizon. So I wouldn't trade that for the world. But like you, I didn't grow up really thinking that my culture or my reality or people who looks like me were actually special enough to be in books. They just didn't write books about us. Our experience was not sufficient to be celebrated. And so, you know, it's a subtle kind of, like you said, the way you would feel, because you couldn't relate to the characters. You didn't see your own beauty in literature. And so it's a subtle message that we send to kids, that you're not special enough. Your culture isn't special enough. And so in a way, you're inferior. And so these other cultures, these other people that are celebrated are superior. It's not sad, but it's important from it. And so how you would like to jump into what you asked me about the importance of BIPOC in pre and primary schools. And the thing about it is, I think your exposure to literature and being able to see yourself and see your reality in literature celebrates you. And it kind of impacts, for children, it impacts your identity, because now I see something that's special and I read it. And academically speaking, it's proven that if you can relate to characters, if you can relate to experiences, students understand better. And so if your comprehension is better, then your academic performance is going to be better. You're going to want to read more. You're going to enjoy it. You're going to relate to it. You're going to be able to put yourself, a lot of the techniques that we teach for reading comprehension become easier when you can relate to what you're reading about. And so for me in school, I think the first time I encountered Bahamian literature must have been Susan J. Wallace with Back Home. And that was probably around junior high. Before that, we got excited when we saw our Caribbean neighbors in the books, because that was as close as we could get.
I know.
And so I didn't grow up thinking Bahamian children would grow up to write books about culture. And so, like I said, it kind of affects your identity, because you begin to think, that's not something I can do. It's a limit we put on ourselves, because we haven't seen people like us doing those sorts of things. And then, to be honest, for me, the importance of those types of books, it goes beyond our children, because like I said, it will impact our identity and how we see ourselves. But it also impacts our image and how the world sees us. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Nigerian writer Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. but she did a TED Talk in about 2009 about the day of a single story. And that's when your culture is put forth in the media just from one perspective.
Mm-hmm.
How dangerous is that if that perspective is that of an outsider
Mm-hmm.
who sees us their own, prejudices.
Right.
So we're putting our own culture out there, and so the world sees us, and we wonder why we get tourists who come and ask us, where do the natives live? Do you live in huts? And we think those are dumb questions, but if all they've seen of the Bahamas is what other people put out there, then why should we judge them for that?
Right.
So I think it's important because it impacts our, like I said, it impacts our identity, how we see ourselves, and it impacts our image, how we put ourselves out there to the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so the best way to make sure your story is told correctly is to tell it yourself.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. And I mean, honestly, I wanted to stick to a certain script, but you just hit so many things that I'm just going to roll with it, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, I can relate heavily to everything that you just said. I would not trade any of the books that I read when I was growing up. I read stunning, like the Peter and Jane book, something as simple as that. They set the foundation for me to be able to read the other books that I graduated on to, such as the Nancy Drew and your Hardy Boys stories. So I wouldn't trade it for anything because I read each and every book in those series. But like I said, I wonder how it would have impacted me had I had books that had characters that looked like me. And you are absolutely right about, you know, needing to be able to take back, in essence, how we are portrayed to the world. And Hollywood, I think they have portrayed us basically. I mean, they think Caribbean people are all the same. And so every time I watched a movie, it would always be
The same accent.
the same accent, the same Rastaman locks, the same. It's like, come on, which part of the Bahamas were you at? And so I think it's very important for us to now contribute to our arts and contribute to our literature so that the same way that we were able to benefit from learning about the foreign countries, reading their books, they can now learn about us as well. And so I wholeheartedly agree with everything that you just said. And, you know, I just hope that we can, you know, really get more schools on board with what it is that we're trying to do. So that being said, now I guess you could say we could curtail back into what we were going to talk about, which is the schools, how receptive they have been with celebrating these types of authors and these types of books and exposing them to these students from such an early age so that they can grow to appreciate these books and not just come to realize that we can do it too in junior high. Because the first book I read from a Caribbean person was Becca Lamb. I can remember it very well in grade 7. And I remember feeling like, I don't know that I want to read this. This is not going to be the same kind of quality as something else written by somebody else, you know. So I felt a little, it was a stigma attached to it. And then after you read it, you realize, oh wait, we have like some really talented Caribbean people. So
Definitely.
you know, tell me, what do you think in your experience as a professional teacher, how receptive the schools you've worked at have been celebrating these authors?
Okay. Well, actually, my view of how receptive schools are, Bahamian schools are to the books, to Bahamian books, would come more from my perspective as the writer. Because when I first released, you know, we always have Bahamians don't support their own. We don't appreciate our culture. We'll listen to whatever music, but we won't listen to ours.
Right.
And so that's the impression that's given, that we don't consider our own stuff to be quality. And I really didn't find that to be true. That was one of the things that kind of blew my mind the most, the way it was supported. I'll say from the beginning, when I did my soft launch, I did something at the Children's Library, and I invited two of the schools. Well, I was at Mary Star at the time, so I had the pre-K department and then kinder care.
Okay.
And the teachers, the schools were right on board. They let them come out. I've been invited to, even before I was at Sunland. Sunland was the first school that actually invited me to come and read at their assembly, the primary school assembly. They called me back in for literacy week to read to the third graders. I've been invited, well, a friend of mine, Miss Rashida Roll, she was acting principal up in the East before the storm, and for the past 3 years, she would invite me. I'd ride all the way up there just to read to the little ones. Preschools, actually Bartlett Hill Primary and Hugh Campbell, when they had their literacy weeks or their library weeks, they invited me to not just to read, but actually be a guest and speak about writing, speak about Bahamian literature on the whole. So not just to read, but to let the kids know, you know, you can write books, not just write, but you can publish, you can illustrate. And Jack Hayward Senior High, you would think it would be just the primary schools. When they had their library week, they had Bahamian authors, so they had all of us out there with our books and set up a table. And even the schools that I went to speak, they put out big displays. They covered the whole doors of the classroom with different Bahamian authors and put up their books. And I was surprised at the amount of them that were there. But the schools have been very receptive. As long as I was available, they would be. I wouldn't have to reach out. They were reaching out
To you.
to ask me to come. And so I feel if we make the books available and we make ourselves available, I think the schools will be very receptive. And so I have not gotten a negative reaction. Whenever I would go to school, I would donate a book, but they would even still purchase books. So I feel the Bahamian schools are very, very receptive. Now, I did have the experience of submitting my book to the Ministry of Education to be considered actually to be used in the schools. Didn't quite turn out the way I had hoped, but it was promising. I did get a positive review and they did recommend the books. However, they didn't purchase the book to put in the schools. I just got a letter which I could use when I was the principal to let them know that it was approved by the ministry.
Okay.
And so something I just started to work on when COVID-19 hit, and so schools shut down, so I had to stop. But I found that as long as you make yourself available, the schools will embrace you.
So on that note, I concur. New author, well, relatively new. I've been out for about a year. But, you know, it all seems so new because Hurricane Dorian came and just like, boop, press pause on every plan that I had. But, you know, I did have the experience of reading at a literacy week. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Ms. Meadows reached out to me and she got me to read at a literacy week. I can't remember the school. I think it was Freeport Primary, yes. But we combined it with Sunland. And then I also had the opportunity to go to Sunland during my Generation Y segment with ZNS. And I was able to read to the students there. And that for me was such like a heartwarming experience because Sunland was the place where I really got, you know, deep into books. And so for me to be able to come back as an author and read to the students, that was like, you know, amazing to me. It's a moment that I will always be logged in my mind. And so far, the experience and the feedback that I've gotten from my book from school teachers has been nothing but positive. They are glad to see, you know, us authors out there writing these books so that their children can read these books that have characters that look like them, or at least include storylines that they can relate to coming from a Caribbean perspective or Bahamian perspective. And so I wholeheartedly agree. What I wanted to mention was, you know, the schools are receptive, and on our part, we have to be available. But I feel like it could be, you know, a little bit more of a partnership effort between the Ministry of Education, private schools, and public schools administration, that is, to join together and say, we're going to actively find what all Bahamian authors we can probably include on the reading list for this year, so that our PK and our primary school sections, they at least receive that literature for the school year, each year. Each year go out and look actively to see any updates, any new authors that they can expose these children to these new books. So that's something that I was thinking is a possible solution. Did you have any other ideas in mind as to how we could, probably really ramp up the effort and get these books in schools and get these children reading these books that we're putting out?
Well, when I thought about it, like I said, to me, in actually trying as the writer to get them in the schools, it kind of seems like you do have to go knocking on doors.
Right.
But perhaps, if we come together, perhaps if we unite and put together units, or maybe just collaborate, because one other thing I did, because being a vice principal, then I'm a part of the Vice Principals Association. And also that was something I did right before COVID. I think the last meeting that we had as the Principal and Vice Principals Association, I was actually brought in as a guest speaker. And so I was able to share my books. And I was getting some interest from the different schools, and they were taking numbers and letting me know that they wanted me to come in and speak with them and things of that nature. But because sometimes different schools would decide which books they're going to use within their schools. They have that autonomy. So, but yes, those efforts got cut down. But I'm not delayed, but not denied.
Right.
Right. Interruption is divine instructions, and so I believe that God is going to work it out. And so we just have to keep going at it. Anything that's worth having is not going to come easy. And so this right now is the beginning, or this is an effort towards that, because you may have other administrators listening now. They may even see the video later. Us reaching out to them, coming together and working together. I think we just need to encourage it.
Right.
We just need to see that the students are receptive and the teachers are receptive. Now it's just us looking to see how we can incorporate it into the curriculum.
Right. So I think it could also be more of an incentive to other persons who may want to write, to know that once they write it, it's not going to be stagnated. Their efforts, I should say, won't be stagnated. They will feel as if they have the support of their island, their nation behind them, to really celebrate their work. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, I also feel as if maybe if we really champion the positive impacts, if we really, put that out there, then maybe they would use that. Maybe it can be used as an incentive to get Ministry of Education and others to really think about it and act on it. And, so that it's not so much of a fight on the author's side. Not saying that our journey should be as easy as possible. There is beauty in the journey, but it would be awesome if it could be a little bit
much beauty in the destination as well.
Yes. It just would be so much better if it flowed a little bit easier. So
I agree. It's encouraging if you knew that you're going to produce something and you already know that there's a place for it.
Right.
Because it's not a cheap endeavor to put together a quality product.
Yeah.
It's not. I'm sure you know.
I know. It takes so much to take something out of your head and actually put forth the effort to write it, go through the effort of copywriting it, getting it illustrated and published, and then you have to market it, get it printed, all kinds of things. So, there's so much anxiety already built up before you release this work, because you don't know how it's going to be received. But it would be awesome if, like how in the US, if a little brown girl, she writes a book, she goes on social media. It's not saying that it blows up overnight, but her her neighborhood, her eventually the state she might live in, everyone is going to champion behind that girl to make sure that her book gets at least on the local news, make sure it gets on the national news, you know. So if we could do that, take that same concept and apply it to in the Bahamas, that would be really good.
Yes, you actually really have to put a lot of effort into it if you want to. I recall, and I'm not gonna name anybody, any businesses, but I do recall because I have put the book in a number of stores on the island, here on the island. I recall going into one of the bookstores one day, and I just wanted to see where it was,
Mm-hmm.
and I looked, and I didn't see it. So I went to the register and I asked for the book, and so they checked to see if. So I said, well, they hadn't called me for the money, so obviously the book hadn't been sold.
Right.
And so they checked the inventory and they said, no, we have a couple copies left. And so they told me where to look for it. So I went and I looked again. And I said, I'm just not seeing it. And so it was in the back, somewhere in the corner, in the Bahamian section.
This is what I'm
The
saying.
Bahamian section was at the back of the store in the corner. And then the other books were displayed up front.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of threw me for a loop because I was thinking, I would think the Bahamian books would be up front.
Right. Right. I mean, nothing.
I would call anything because, you know, the business still does support me very well.
Right.
So I definitely want to do that. But that kind of threw me for a loop. And then another business that actually did not receive the books said that the Bahamian books don't really sell like that. And another one took it and said, well, the good thing about you is that you market your own books so people will know about it. Because other than that, they'll just sit here on the counter.
Yes. I've experienced the same thing. There was a store, you know, I gave my books to them and it just pretty much, fortunately for me, it did make it in the front, but it was just kind of like placed there. And I'm like, okay, imagine if our bookstores really took the time to create a BIPOC Caribbean Bahamian section where we could really decorate and make that section pop out and make our Bahamians want to buy our books rather than just sticking it somewhere and then it doesn't sell. Make it look attractive, the same way how you have that big flyer with Joel Osteen or Bishop T.D. Jakes just for their new book when it's launched. Nothing wrong with them, but it could be applied to us Bahamian authors as well. Yeah.
I agree. It could be an easier journey. Because like we said, it's a lot that you put into it to actually get it done, the final product, and you don't want to just take it to put on the shelf just to say, I wrote a book. You actually wanted to get into the hands of children.
Right. So I just wanted to, we're going to try and wrap up and bring this in as much as possible. But I had like some suggestions that we could probably bounce back and forth about how, you know, schools can even more celebrate Bahamian authors. And one of my suggestions was like if schools had a table or a bookshelf, like what I was saying with the bookstores, where we placed BIPOC, Bahamian, and Caribbean books that were either containing those characters or written by those types of people. And each month, let's say, for instance, we highlight a particular author. Like January, we're going to highlight author Tiffany Meadows. February, we're going to highlight author Dominique Smith. And then not just read the books, but actually learn about the author so that the students can learn, okay, this person came from my country, they came from my island, you know, they did something like this, they wrote this book, and the children's minds would just, you know, take off as the wonders of what could happen when if they were to do it as well.
Yes, because then it's not just because with me, I had my books illustrated and published in the U.S., but then they were done by a Grand Bahamian. Let me put that plug in there for Audra Lovely, Lovely Publishing.
Yes.
Just put that out and always give her credit because You did an excellent job. And, you know, a lot of times people look and they would be surprised at the quality of the product. And they're like, oh, you got this done in the States. And yes, by a Grand Bahamian. And so then one thing I recall when I went to visit Sunland for the Literacy Week, and the teacher at the time didn't just have me read and talk about me. She stopped to say that the book was also illustrated. The book was also published. And so it's not just, you can be an author, you can be an illustrator, you can be a publisher, you can create. And so it opens up the field to so many other professions, not just, oh, I can write too.
Right.
You know, someone may not be a writer, but then you can still create. And so, yes, if we take the time to, like you say, look at more than just look at it and discuss it and then find out more about it, then, you know, students will be impacted and will be inspired in different ways.
Right.
So
I guess just to really tie it all together, I wanted to ask you, do you feel that us as authors, and I may be using the wrong term here, but kind of struggling, do you think that we have a social responsibility after we have done this great journey of authorship to reach back out into the community and talk to students, talk to adults, share our experience, and try to get them also, you know, there's so many people, sometimes I talk to people and they're like, you know, I wrote a book. I wrote it like 10 years ago and it's just catching dust, you know, and so do you think that we have a social responsibility to try and encourage these people to, and these students to write and publish their works? Because ultimately what we want to do is have a vast selection to choose from. In order for us to be able to increase the amount of books our students are reading, we have to increase the amount of works being submitted and published. So do you think that that's something that we are not morally, but socially responsible to do?
now this may sound, I don't know how this is going to come across, but I will say it like this. I don't necessarily think that as an author you have an obligation or responsibility to help anyone else, because some people look at it as competition.
They do.
But if you look at it as collaboration, like you said, the more we put out there, the more of a presence we make. So it's in our best interest to encourage.
Mm-hmm.
However, you know, just being an author is not going to make you feel responsible for that. Now, I think that's just goes more to your character.
Okay.
So for me, as the author, I may not necessarily feel obligated. I'm putting the book out there. But me as the educator, I feel obligated.
Yes.
Me as a mentor, me as a child of God, that's biblical. Mentorship is biblical.
Mm-hmm.
I feel so there's an obligation on me, but I don't feel like it comes from being a writer, because just because you've done something and achieved some modicum of success at it doesn't obligate you. But it's your character, you know, and so as an educator, as a mentor, as a Bahamian.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think it speaks to a calling. I think it speaks to a calling over someone's life. If that's what they would like to do, to go out in the community and encourage people, then by all means. I would like to say personally, from my experience so far, I haven't had anyone view me as a competitor. In fact, it has been the opposite. I feel like it has been a community of support. For instance, the way how you and I have been able to, you know, help each other out. You pushed me outside of my comfort zone to do the book reading for Literacy Week. And then you also bent over backwards to make my experience at Sunland, reading to those children, the way that you decorated that classroom and everything. I absolutely appreciated what you did. And I think if we were to adopt that mentality, it's like a win for Dominique doesn't mean that it takes away from me. I think that it's a push for all of us. And so if somebody else is publishing a book, I'm going to possibly share that on my social media, because I'm like, hey, look, another author, another Bahamian author. Let's celebrate this person. So I think that if we continue to keep that type of mentality, that adopt that way of thinking, that we can continue to strengthen and build this community of authors that really just support each other in our walk, because it's not an easy one.
It is kind of, the small-minded person may think, well, not too many Bahamian books are going to be sold, or that people don't really support, so I'm not going to put my book and yours there. I'm going to put my book out. And so that's kind of small-minded. But obviously, together we make a stronger impact. We present a stronger presence if we're united. And so, and just going back to your reading, you did such an excellent job with the kids.
Thank you.
Just had to let your viewership know that you did an excellent job. The kids enjoyed it.
I was nervous with that, and as life would have it, I would get to return the favor because Miss Meadows pushed me out of my comfort zone, and tonight I have pushed her out of her comfort zone.
Surely pushing me out of mine.
But I am absolutely ecstatic that you went ahead and you agreed. And look, I feel like we had an amazing conversation tonight. I think it's a lot for people to really think about in terms of, how they are going to go forward, and making sure that they expose their children to BIPOC, Bahamian, and Caribbean books. Maybe parents can check up with schools and say, hey, do you have this author's book on your reading list? Maybe if parents go to the administration and say, I heard this is a good book, maybe the class that my child is in should read it, those types of things that would be able to really increase the presence of these books and overall show the importance of it in our classrooms. So with
you saying that actually reminded me of an experience I had as a teacher. When I was at Catholic High, I had a student that came to me from St. George's, and I was the literature teacher.
Okay.
And he came with this book, and before I ever wrote anything. And he said, this is a really good book. We read this at my school, and it was When Doves Cry by Reverend Keith Russell. And he said, this is really good. And he's like, I don't even read like that, but I love this book. And he was so passionate about it. I'm like, this boy came to a whole new school, and he's bringing this book that we didn't even use in the school at the time to show me.
Yeah.
And so I said, let me borrow it. And I took it home, and I brought it back the next day. And so he said, no, you can keep it till you're done. And I said, no, I'm done. I already read it. And for years after that, we incorporated When Doves Cry into our curriculum. And for the students who weren't sitting the national exam, who were just doing a literary appreciation class, that's the book. And they ate that book up.
Yeah.
Because it was set in Freeport. Well, not in Freeport because it was mostly 8 Mile Rock, but it was Bahamian, and students who didn't usually read. I've had adults who don't normally read. And I've recommended that, and they enjoy it because they relate to it.
Yes.
And so just like that one child coming from his school, having read the book, just mentioned it to me as the teacher, and after that we used it for years.
Yes. And that's the type of difference that I'm talking about right there. One child can make a difference. One parent can make a difference. But what I wanted to say is, for me, something that made me appreciate Bahamian books was reading Woman Take Two. I had to read that in 12th grade, and I'm like, this is required reading, like it's an obligation. I could not stop reading the book. I remember I felt it, and I was like, what kind of book is it? And then my teacher, Mr. Hoyle, he was like, oh, it's a play. And I was like, okay. And then I read it, and I was like, wow, this woman, she was an outstanding, phenomenal writer. And it caused me to really explore more of her work because of it. So I think that, Bahamians are an extremely talented group of people. And I think we should not underestimate our gifts and our talents. We should explore it. We should see where it takes us. And
you spoke about Women Take Two, and I'll just say, I think we've come a long way, like you may have alluded to earlier, in the upper grades. Because I know when I was teaching literature, at one point, 10th grade year was Bahamian Lit. Woman Take Two, Michael Pintard, Susan Wallace, everything we read that year
Was
was Bahamian.
Bahamian.
Students loved 10th grade year.
Yes.
And then again, we got into grade 12. And they have incorporated a number of things into the BGCSE for the literature, GCSE, some Bahamian lit. And so we have made some great strides, I think, in the upper levels. But of course, we know everything starts at that bottom level.
This is
That's
what
where you
I'm
start
saying.
building that foundation. So it is indeed very, very important that we make inroads into that area.
Yes. If we can introduce it to them from an early age, then by the time they reach high school, they already know the quality of work that we put out.
They probably already be writing.
This is it, because they've already been inspired.
Last year, I think it was, or 2 years ago at Sunland when we did the Literacy Week, we had 3 of our students. One was in 2nd grade, one was in 4th grade, I think, or 5th grade, and the other one was in high school, and they had all written books that they brought and they had there and that we had in the library, and they were writing. And so if they're exposed to it at that age, by the time they get to high school, they'll already be authors themselves in some cases.
But what I actually try to do is I try to tell whoever comes along and they ask me questions, don't wait until you're an adult. Don't wait until you get older. If you have those stories in your mind as a little child and you find yourself doodling and coloring, there's so much authenticity that comes along with those doodles. When you see it actually put together and published in a book, if you have a child who is naturally inclined and prone to writing creative stories, by all means, try and see if you could publish a book.
Sometimes they just tell the stories. They just create things, and if you can encourage them to write it down or start writing it or developing it and collecting it, they can have a collection of stories before they reach adulthood.
Yes, and they can be collecting royalties on those stories for all those years. So, Miss Meadows, I think we want to go ahead and wrap up this conversation. But before we do that, please, you alluded to some fantastic illustration that was in your book. And I want to be able to help the audience go ahead and get copies of your book so they too can see the illustration and they can read the amazing story that you wrote. So please, once again, repeat the names of your books and let us know how we can be able to get them. How we can purchase them.
Okay. Well, the first book, and I have it here, is Let's Meet Ladina.
Yes.
The second installment is Ladina and the Color Pink. And both of the books, you can find me on social media. You're more easily able to find me on Facebook.
Yes.
Tiffany Meadows. So just put in my name, Tiffany Meadows. And I also have books the books are in Invading Force Bookstore. Okay. Next to the Joel Plaza. Before the storm, they were always in Kelly's. I'm looking to have it again. Up Bellevue Business Depot, as well as Baffles Booksellers. Okay. So stores that on the island that carry the books, and then I always keep a stock with me as well. So if you want, a lot of times people want autographed copies. So I guess they're hoping one day I'll be a big celebrity. I don't know why. But
I always feel strange doing autographs. I'm like, but I'm your favorite.
Right? I know, right? Yes. But if they ask for it, I guess it's just a personal touch.
Yes.
So it's not anything to say, oh, well, I'll sign it for you because it's just a personal touch to say thank you for supporting me. So, yes, for the ones who want, and then they're also on Amazon.
Okay. I was just about to ask.
Pardon me?
I said I was just about to ask if it was on.
Yes, they are. They are.
Okay, that's awesome. So, to everyone who's joined in, hello, Mrs. Archer. Ms. Meadows just announced that the books are sold locally in quite an extensive list of stores. So you can pick, choose, and refuse which location you want to go to, after the lockdown has ended. And there's also the option of buying the book on Amazon. Is it only available as a paperback or is it an ebook as well?
No, it's a paperback.
Okay.
It's a paperback.
So go ahead and order it and then ship it home if you cannot wait until the lockdown is over. Also, I would like to let everyone know that myself, I have my book, So We Speak Day. It is available on Amazon. I currently have a back to school promotion going on where you can get I think it's $2 savings on the paperback and $4 savings on the ebook. I also have some copies on my person, and it's also available in H&L bookstore. So go ahead and contact either one of us, Miss Meadows on Facebook or myself on Instagram, if you would like to secure yourself a signed copy. So with that, I would like to say to everyone, thank you so much for joining us.
1 second, Dominique. 1 second, Dom. I'd just like to say thank you for inviting me and bringing me outside my comfort zone.
It
Thank
went
you for
well, right?
Yes. Yes, it went well. I enjoyed talking to you.
That's awesome. Good, because I might reach out to you to do something else later.
And you know, I don't say no to you, Dom.
Thank you. All right, so to the audience, thank you so much. I hope you have an evening, good evening, and Miss Meadows, thank you so much for joining me. I truly appreciate it, and I look forward to what else projects we partner on in the future.
Definitely. Just let me know.
Bye.